Welcome back. We're examining the increasingly blurred lines between military assistance for development and the traditional aid provided by civilian NGOs in conflict zones. It's an issue that presents challenges to the traditional aid community as their workers face greater risks. Discussing this, I have on the show Dr. George Rupp, President of the International Rescue Committee, famous for its work across the world. Dr. Rupp is in New York, and in the studio here I have Jeff Grieco, Chief of External Affairs for the International Relief and Development, International Relief and Development IRD, the largest non-profit group implementing U.S. foreign assistance. Jeff Grieco, if I can get back to you with the next question. You heard Dr. Rupp talking about some of the policy changes that took place. What did you make of those policy changes when they occurred?
Well, I was working within the administration at that time, and there was a great deal of debate within the administration as to solving this issue, which was the seminal issue following the military conflict in Afghanistan following 9/11, was how do we get Afghanistan to develop and to stabilize quickly so our troops can come home. Many models were looked at. The Provincial reconstruction team model that George has focused on today is one of several that the Secretary, the National Security Advisor, and the President had to decide upon. Eventually, they decided to go by the PRT model, principally because they thought that was the easiest way of not having large-scale numbers of civilians working on military bases, but instead creating civilian-led organizations of which the DoD and the military staff are securing perimeters and participating in the PRT only from a security standpoint. So they have served a purpose up to now, and if the President Obama is now rethinking that strategy, I think that the question will be, how are we still going to be able to implement programming without losing large numbers of NGO or contractors or grantees in the field by the removal of PRTs, and what else is coming in its stead?
Now, I know you refer to the militarization, as people call it, as community stabilization programs. And you said in your engagement with military projects, mistakes have been made in the past. What sort of mistakes, and what's done differently now that gives you confidence it can work?
Well, mistakes in terms of implementation on the ground, I'm not sure what specifically you might be referring to there. The issue of doing development assistance frequently. Most people in the United States, when they look at U.S. foreign assistance going overseas, they look at it as they should, that this is precious tax dollars that are going over, and if they don't see the immediacy of results in many cases, they're very frustrated by that, and that's understandable. But what the United States has learned since the Marshall Plan, where we launched major foreign assistance programming, is development takes a period of time, usually between 3 to 5 years to help stabilize conflict-ridden countries, longer periods to see the kind of dramatic development that you need to have happen. In those cases, the United States that has had the most success, it's been willing to make that investment over time, South Korea being one of those and others. In the situation of Afghanistan and Iraq, the public, because our troops are still engaged in the field and people are anxious to get them home, is less perhaps patient than they're going to need to be to see the kind of results that will help stabilize the country and allow our boys to come back.
We've got a caller on the line who's been waiting patiently in London. Fahel, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. It is a way to lessen or eliminate the attention around the concept of militarization. For example, the war on terror requires deployment of a very large number of troops in many parts of the world. These forces are most likely to stay in those locations indefinitely. The only way to make them stay normal is to give them new duties and responsibilities. And the best of the ideas is to make them seen engaged in not only in destruction, but also in the task of reconstruction. The only thing I can see is to give the military a cover-up. I think if somebody really wants to help those countries reconstruct, they have to not only bring the military, but anyone who is capable of taking part in the task of reconstruction. I think the whole idea.
So, Mr. Fahel, do you feel there's a cover-up? Do you feel that there is a cover-up in the sense that the construction projects are an excuse to keep the military in those locations?
I definitely believe that the whole idea, because we know there are many parts in the world burning. I mean, it's Iraq, Somalia, Afghanistan, and the people have got sentiment towards any American coming. So in order to facilitate a way for these soldiers to come, and we all know that this war is indefinite. Nobody knows when it's going to finish.
Let me ask Dr. Rupp if to some degree there is the danger that if the military is involved in in such sort of reconstruction and development projects that it only entrenches them in those countries and limits the prospect of them being withdrawn as a military force from those locations?
Well, I think the prior question is the cost effectiveness of having military engage in these sorts of projects. There is an enormous difference in what it costs to build a school or an irrigation system or a sanitation system using the military as distinguished from using community-based development agencies. The disproportion in resources between what the Department of Defense has and what the Department of State and USAID have is staggering. Let me give one specific example. In Afghanistan in 2009, the SERP program, the Commander's Emergency Response Program, was funded with $1.5 billion. $1.5 billion for kind of walking around money for commanders. That is 300 times the total budget of the IRC in Afghanistan. And for the IRC's budget, that involves a presence in 1,500 villages, involves 400 staff who are in close contact with communities and building projects they would like to have. It is simply not viable to undertake those kinds of reconstruction projects by the military.
So interesting point you're making, Jeff Grieco. If I could put that to you about the budgeting process. I mean, a majority of U.S. construction funds and reconstruction funds from since 2001 for Afghanistan have come through the Defense Department, not State Department or USAID. Now, isn't that creating a self-fulfilling prophecy where the Defense Department will continue to take over the budgeting and funding of these initiatives, meaning that basically the civilian agencies don't get the funds for it, and perhaps those skill sets that Dr. Rupp is referring to will be lost?
Yes, I think the resource issue is the very right place to focus the discussion because USAID, traditionally one of the premier development agencies in the world, has lost staff every year for the last 20 years to the point now where the attrition rate has just totally destabilized their ability to project well into conflict situations like Afghanistan. They're now rapidly rebuilding that. They're on an aggressive hiring program right now, but as a result of that, at the peak, AID had between 8,000 and 10,000 direct hire employees. They now have less than 2,000 right now, foreign service officers being able to do this work. So the resource issue is the right focus for the discussion. Now, Secretary Gates has said repeatedly over the last 2 years and under President Obama as well that the Department of Defense has no interest in undertaking a development program at the Department of Defense, but if no one else is going to do it or get the resources to do it, they will seek to try to help bring resources in to do those activities. And one example is they're funding right now a stabilization office at the State Department that is attempting to bring this together.
Unfortunately, I have to stop you there and thank you for the contribution. And Dr. Rupp, I have to thank you for joining us from New York.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for being with us. Now, remember, you can follow our program via Twitter, where we'll keep you notified on upcoming shows. Be sure to tweet us your questions and comments to pose to our guests. On the next show, a novel approach to Bangladesh's eco-crisis. One young man is adapting to the country's rising waters with floating schools. Be sure to tune in for that. But for now, from me and the team, goodbye. See you next time.